Can you imagine getting off a boat after you have gone through a very traumatic and eventful voyage and being welcomed by a madman who was kneeling at the feet of Jesus? The disciples must have seen it as a strange sight, but more than that, as they would think about what they have just completed. They have seen Jesus, who was sleeping in the midst of a storm. They woke him up, accusing him of not caring that they perish. And then he gets up and very calmly turns and walks to the edge of the boat and speaks to the wind and to the waves. And immediately thereafter, the wind and the waves disappear. And what was once a life-threatening circumstances where you were about to be swallowed up by the waves, you are met this time by a mirror-smooth surface that makes the rest of your voyage quite uneventful. And yet as you arrive to the other side, you are met by a man who would be described as crazy, kneeling at the feet of Jesus. One could only imagine the thoughts of the disciples. What now again? Jesus is now in Mark chapter 4. He has been teaching his disciples about himself. The experience they had at the end of that chapter was a life-changing experience, but at the same time it was a baffling experience. So much so that it ended with a question: who is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him? Now they are confronted with another experience. This time it involves an individual whom the Bible describes in chapter 5 verse 1 as a man who lived among the tombs and who had an unclean spirit. We read in chapter 5 verse 4 that he had supernatural strength, where chains and shackles could not hold him. In addition to that, we are told that no one was strong enough to subdue him. And then in verse 5 we are told that day and night this man is tormented. It is described as day and night among the tombs and in the mountains. He was continually crying out, and in addition to that, he was self-destructive in that he was harming himself by cutting himself with the stones. And being met with that kind of individual after you have gone through the experience of coming close to death, the experience of asking the question, who is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him? Because as you're processing this event, you immediately run into another event, and this time it involves an encounter with what the Bible describes as a demoniac man, a man who is occupied by demons. And in essence, a man who, as the Greek text would describe, as the evil demons has swallowed him up. The picture or the scene must have been overwhelming to these disciples. Yet we are given insight into the tragedy of this man's lifestyle. He was tormented day and night. We are told that he was unclean according to Jewish standards, and he had what could only be described as a death-filled residence. He lived among the tombs, and it was a lonely and isolated existence because no one lived in the tombs. And then we find that there was a continual crying out. And to add insult to injury, this man had a self-destructive tendency where he was cutting himself with stones. Fresh in the disciples' minds must be this question: who is this? And Jesus is answering this question by giving them the answer in sort of a puzzle piece. The first puzzle piece came from the experience on the ocean or experience on the lake. They seen him as the one who is greater than Jonah, in that Jonah slept in the midst of his rebellion against God. Jesus slept with the knowledge that his Father was in control of the elements. And then the piece of the puzzle is expanded by Jesus speaking into the ocean or speaking into the elements. And he's doing what only God could do, and that is speaking order where there is chaos. In the beginning of time, God has spoken into the chaotic situation in which creation was, and by the power of his word, he brought order. And Jesus is now doing the same thing which God the Father did. And so we see the question being answered in phase one being, who is this that even the wind and the waves obey him? And the answer is someone greater than Jonah. Someone who does what God the Father did, and that is speaking order where there is chaos. And now in this experience that they were about to go through, another piece of the puzzle will be answered. And in this time, it will involve a type of contest, of encounter with Jesus and the demonic forces of hell. And so we read that in the passage, we read that at the first encounter, the man opening his mouth, it wasn't him speaking, but it was the demons that have taken over his body. And in verse 7 we read, and crying out in a loud voice, he says, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High?" And then there is a pleading, "I plead you by God, do not taunt me." And so the disciples must have even been more baffled by this man's voice and what he said. What do you want with me? And he acknowledges the status of Jesus. Jesus, Son of the Most High. And so with this encounter, we find that the disciples have to learn that even the forces of darkness had an idea of who Jesus was. They knew what his status was. And his status is Jesus, Son of the Most High. That's something that they would have to learn, but it's something that the demonic powers already knew. But it was not a comforting knowledge, it was a knowledge that brought them fear, because immediately after making that acknowledgement, the demon or the demons inside the man realize that this might be the time of judgment, and so they ask him the question, or they plead with him, do not torment me. And so the demons or the demonic spirits that occupied the man gave us a insight into the power and the might of Jesus, because they recognized that Jesus had the power to torment them. But Jesus, being totally in control of the situation, speaks to the demon, but do not answer the question. And he takes control. And so in a sense, even though it might have been an encounter, but there wasn't a war. Because from the beginning to the end of the scene, we find that the demonic person, or the demons inside the person, was already in a state of surrender. And by taking charge of the situation, Jesus demonstrated that he has lordship over the demonic powers. And so he asked a question. He says, "What is your name?" And so by asking the question, he is demonstrating that he has dominion over the demons. The demons replied, or the demons inside the man, we call it the demoniac, replied. He says, "My name is Legion." And it indicated that there was a large number of demonic spirits that occupied the man. And then he gives the reason for them being called Legion, because we are many. And the man is not possessed by one demon, neither is he possessed by 2 or 3 or 10, but by thousands of demons. And Jesus, being in complete control of the situation, commands the demon to enter into a herd of pigs that were close by. And the herd was numbering 2,000. And immediately when the demonic powers entered into the herds of pigs, the herd rushed down the steep bank into the ocean or into the sea, and the demonic powers that once occupied the man has now left him, and the man is delivered from demonic slavery, while at the same time the swines or the pigs are drowned in the sea. And Jesus sends them into this swines or into the herd of pigs to demonstrate that the goal of the demonic powers was always to destroy its host. And here the man who was completely occupied, his body being taken over by the demonic powers, he was in a state of self-destruction and torment, and being tormented day and night. It was the ultimate goal of the demonic powers is to destroy the host that they have occupied. And so now at the end of the scene, we find that Jesus is totally in command, and the man is sitting at the feet of Jesus, in the presence of Jesus. Formerly, where before that he was dwelling among the tombs, the man who was, one has to presume, was naked, and he is described as being clothed. And in scripture, being clothed is a sign of wellness. And now he's in his right mind. And we are at the end of this long episode, which is 20 verses long in Mark's description, that the number of demons that occupied this body serves to demonstrate to Mark's original readers and then to us that even though the demons were incredibly strong, so strong that no human being could control them, Jesus is stronger still. And in answer to the question that the disciples were asking, who is this? That even the wind and the waves obey him. The answer now is given a second phase where he says, the one who stills the wind and the one who calms the ocean and calms the waters is the one who is Lord over the demons, who is indeed Lord over the very prince of demons. And so the demonic forces or the spirits that occupied the man tells us something that we should know, which they know already in chapter 5 verse 7, that he is the Son of the Most High. And so with the answer to that question, we see that it's answered in phases. First phase was Jesus is the one who is greater than Jonah. Jesus is the one who does what the Father had done, and that is speaking order into chaotic situations. And here we find Jesus, the answer is given another layer where Jesus is the mighty Lord who is the conqueror of demons. In addition to that, he is the Son of the Most High. And what Mark is telling us is that we can put our confidence in the person of Christ because of who he is. And so what he's saying to us is that we can be confident in the fact that by placing our confidence in Jesus Christ, we can be assured and secured in the knowledge that we have placed our confidence in the right person. The one who is greater than Jonah, the one who speaks order where there is chaos, and in this case, the one who calms the storm that is going on the inside of this man, because he is the mighty Lord, the conqueror of demons.